The other side is, are we seeing social media managers, marketers who work for marketing agencies doing this as part of their strategy? And I haven't found that to be the case yet. If they are repurposing, then that's repurposing, right? Which is different than repeating. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today, Vitaly, I wanted to talk a little bit more about repeating content. It's something that we get asked pretty often by people who use Vista Social, and I guess I see it a lot too in just different circles of social media management. We've heard a lot of people make their case for whether it should be a part of your strategy, one way or the other, and it's just something we wanted to dive in and talk about today on the episode. So Vitaly, I know it's a charged one, so go ahead and kick us off.
A lot of opinions here for sure. So essentially the idea is that the content that you post gets seen by people, your followers, right then and there, right? So it's likely that whenever you are posting stuff, if your followers aren't online at that point, that by the time they are opening up their phone and scrolling down, your content, your post, your video is so much further down their feed, that the few scrolls that they do are not enough to see it. So the argument that people make for repeating content is that you post it once, you hit the people who were there, say at 1 o'clock, and then you repeat it at 5 o'clock, and you got those, that came from work that perusing their social feed. So that sort of is the argument for repeating content. I think over the years, we've seen a variety of terms used. For instance, evergreen content, repeated content, recycled content, with an idea being of repeating the same exact content more than once, right? And you're right, people are adamant either at repeating content or they're adamant at not repeating content. And I think I'm definitely in one of those camps. I won't reveal which yet, not to make our sort of conversation biased, but it is certainly a charged topic, although less so today than it was probably a decade ago, where people were repeating content much freer than they are today. But these days, and what do you, by the way, see? Are you seeing this being asked because you are at the forefront of our, interaction with customers? Do you see it? What type of users are typically asking you for it and arguing for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really mainly has come out of just feature requests, right? Within customer success, we see on our public roadmap, people are making the suggestions, and a lot of the conversation, if I could take our listeners through it, is like, hey, imagine you're scheduling a post. Let's just say this is a text-based post for now, and we can get into maybe the more advanced options and stuff like that too, but it's just a text-based post, and maybe it's going over to X or LinkedIn or Facebook, and you're going to post it tomorrow at 5. And so the idea here is that I want to also be able to schedule it the next day at 1, the next day at 5, and what we're talking about here, the request is the exact same post, same copy, same everything identically. And so I haven't really pinpointed like a use case that's broad, meaning like, hey, this is specifically people who work in news, right? Or specifically people who are trying to repeat a certain promotion that they've got going on. A lot of the cases where we see that being applied on social as a strategy in general, there's variations to the post, right? I've got, I don't know, it's 5 days of giveaways that I'm doing for the holidays, right? I'm going to do like a pre-giveaway start post, and then I'll do one every day leading up to the end of it, but they're always slightly tweaked. There's usually some sort of different twist to how we're posting it. So the idea of taking a clone of this post and publish it various times throughout the next couple of days is, I guess, kind of one side of the extreme, or maybe not extreme, but one side of the realm of the request that we get there.
Yeah, I always felt that type of request is sort of rooted in the way people understand SEO or web, whereby the amount of content is ultimately what matters. So if only we can produce that many more articles, if only we can create that many more posts to our website, and that would trigger the Google algorithm to search algorithms to rank us higher, right? But I think the fallacy here is that social media isn't about the quantity of tweets or the quantity of posts, right? Social media is all about relationships. And I don't think personally anyways, not that I'm on social much, but that I follow, say, there is a history channel that I like. I don't see them posting the same documentary more than once, right? So they'll post it and I'll watch it, and then the next day if I get alerts for the same documentary, I'll be kind of curious as to what's going on. Why am I seeing there twice? Because I am their subscriber and it is showing up in my feed, right? But I think it's that kind of mentality of not maybe understanding the value of the relationship and just looking at it more mechanically. Oh, if I can only hit everybody, every one of my followers, if I can only make them see it. And I wonder if making them see it is really not what this is all about. Although, again, we've seen situations where perhaps this is about repeating content, right? I don't know, stock prices. Well, if you're posting stock prices, if the stock price didn't change, perhaps this will be classified as kind of like the same content over and over again. I don't know, car sales. I got this car for sale. This car is still for sale. Although even here, you can kind of see how I'm rephrasing, right, some of the content a little bit. But it's interesting that, again, we are still hearing about this from our users. Well, my kind of theory that it's really coming from perhaps the more of a small business than an agency, would that be sort of a valid theory?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think we're seeing, if we could classify it, there's probably two different camps that we're seeing this a lot, this request. One of them is I'm managing social media for small businesses and I've committed to X amount of posts per week, per month. And so that's maybe part of the flow, right? Hey, the small business wants me once a week to repost this, right? Into which case, sometimes the client gets what they want, kind of a thing, right? Sure. The other side is like, are we seeing social media managers, marketers who work for marketing agencies doing this as part of their strategy? And I haven't found that to be the case yet, right? If they are repurposing, then that's repurposing, right? Which is different than repeating. They're taking their content that maybe was over on YouTube and they're repurposing it to Facebook, right? Or they're repurposing a snippet of a specific, let's say this podcast, right? And taking a 15-second clip and repurposing it somewhere else. Maybe even going as far as like taking some blog posts that they publish on Facebook or X 2 months ago. Now they're going to take a different twist and try to get some more eyes on it on a new post. But again, all of this being around the concept of repurposing, not so much duplicating or replicating the same content over and over again. So yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, and you're right. I think the repurposing is probably the better way of thinking about repeating content. So essentially you are repeating content, but you are doing so by either repeating certain parts of it, if it's a video, like focused areas in a video, if this is something relevant or something paraphrased entirely. So you have basically two things here, right? So one is the concern for the follower, right? So here you are trying to build a relationship with the follower and all of a sudden you're bombarding them with the same message over and over again. By the way, I mean, it's no different than you sending a bunch of emails that are the same, right? So to the same user. I mean, one would argue that your inbox is sort of similar, right? So if I'm getting on average 100 emails a day, chances of me reading yours perhaps are not as significant because again, it could be far on the list, but I don't think we see the repeated emails notion within the email marketing as we do, as we observe this insistence on repeated content with social, particularly within tools. And again, I am trying to approach this, with, as I'm trying to understand it. So I'm not trying to like bash people for trying to repeat it. So I'm really trying to understand it hard as to what is the use case. And that might be like an ongoing process still, where we're still kind of learning about examples and cases for when people, as we kind of contemplate whether we want to implement it as part of our tool. But then you have this other side of the risks, right? And the risks is that networks will penalize you for repeating content these days. Some networks more so than others. But for instance, Twitter is adamant, right, that nobody repeats content. Similar content can get you into trouble in other networks. Substantially similar content, relatively similar content. The enforcement could be something as low touch as maybe like a shadow banning. And I think we spoke about shadow banning in some prior episodes. Or it could get something as aggressive as full suspensions, right? And I think we've certainly have seen in support requests from people like, hey, it's my livelihood, I'd like to get my TikTok back. And it's just not happening because of a variety of reasons. I'm not saying that like repeated content is the only reason, but these are the kind of the harsh penalties that could come into it. So do you though see the repeated content kind of remain perhaps maybe even a service offering by maybe social media managers to clients? Do you feel like they're still offering that as a service? I guess maybe let me paraphrase the question. Would this be maybe like a novice mistake to think of repeated content as a strategy, or would this be like a purposeful strategy being applied by professionals?
Yeah, and I don't want to like right off the bat say, hey, it's the latter, right? Like, hey, these are the professionals. And I also don't want to say, hey, just this is a novice mistake. I'm just getting started, and I just want to kind of like rush a lot of content out. What I'm hoping is that maybe somebody listens to this, and then for the first time we get some actionable insights that show us like, hey, we've done this for the last 6 months, and here are the metrics to show this is why we're doing it, right? We haven't gotten to that just yet. So a lot of it has just been like, this is what we do, and not so much we found success in doing this. And that's what I guess I'm hoping to get out of it as we continue to explore this topic, as we continue to dive into these requests and ask for more insights from users who are requesting these repeated posts. Is like, can you identify, hey, by doing this over the last couple of months, these are the results I've been able to drive on social for my brand or for my client's brand? Because I think that's probably going to be the biggest differentiator. If somebody's thinking and listening about this topic, maybe they've identified it, and that's why it's in their tool set. But I think kind of beyond that, if we like, you talked about the fact that, hey, there's the risk side, but I think if we talk about the algorithms in general, I was listening to a podcast, I think it was an interview on NPR that the founder of TikTok was doing, and he talked about their algorithm. And obviously a lot of networks have been rushing over the last year or two to try to implement a lot of those signals that they use to identify whether, hey, this is the kind of video that Reggie likes. And Reggie's profile is similar to Vitali's profile in the sense that he seems to enjoy this type of video. So let me serve Vitali this video as well. And so I feel like the game has really become more about creating content that is engaging, that's valuable, that gives people the desire to rewatch it, to engage with the post. And again, I guess coming back to the repeated post, I don't see that being the case there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder though if the results, so if you run them out, so let's say you have, 10,000 followers, right? And you do go through this sort of repeated content strategy, I kind of suspect, unfortunately, that you might actually see an improvement in metrics. So I kind of suspect that this repeating may end up benefiting you, perhaps in a short term at least, right? Maybe you will get more likes and perhaps more clicks, because kind of taking a step back against the motivation. And I think the best analogy to this, the need for the repeated content, is this notion that if you are standing in front of the river and the river has ships sailing by, right? And let's say those ships carry advertisement, right? So if the ship sailed before you've gotten to the river, right? Unless it ships again, you're never going to see it, right? So people, that's kind of the argument that I've heard people make, and analogies, right? In favor of repeated content. So repeating content may end up improving the short-term metrics for the brand, but I wonder if the actual brand loyalty and awareness increases in that time. So it's sort of like you're trying to squeeze something out of the existing follower base, but I wonder if that fosters anything other than kind of this more mandated reflex to kind of do stuff, because that's kind of not what you want. You want influence, right? You want people to respect you. You want people to follow you, view you as an authority on a certain subject. To me, that might be lost, but can you quantify that? Can you quantify the loss and influence, or not attaining enough influence? That could be hard, especially if you are seeing few extra likes and few extra impressions. And I think that could be kind of the difficulty here, is that because it could indeed show results, right, for certain situations, for certain types of followers. I don't know, maybe these are stock watchers, or these are gamers watching game results, or sports people watching sports results. And there it's okay to repeat, that New York Rangers, won by that score, and you do that multiple times, or that person scored. And another strategy that I've heard people seen people use here is they don't just kind of just repeat one post, they repeat a lot of posts. So their point is, in this sort of sea of repeats, right? Nobody really cares about that one repeat. I'm going to take, 50 posts, I'm going to recycle them throughout the week. So it doesn't look like it's the same post. So maybe people don't notice it. But what do you think of AI serving as perhaps at least a paraphraser to this content? Would that maybe appease, those who are asking for it?
Yeah, because I think with AI being able to rephrase at least the copy, right, the caption that you're writing, it gives you the opportunity to try something new. And I was watching, there was a Gary Vee video on YouTube the other day where he talks about taking your organic virality and using it as a way to find the best content for your ads, right? And so just kind of go with me here because it'll connect. But the idea is you're posting organically, and for some reason this one post works really well. And so I think if we go through this specific topic, the idea that I've heard in the past is taking this post that worked really well, and now I'm going to repeat it. Now I'm going to take this post, and this is going to become my evergreen recycled post over the next period of time. Whereas what he proposes is instead, why don't we take this post that worked really well, dissect it a little bit, and now we're going to create a version 2 of this post. And maybe we're going to make it slightly funnier. Maybe we're going to, change the image a little bit. And the idea is that you do this over a period of 7, 8, 9, 10 variations, to the extent that when you get to that 10th one, you've somehow created this super monster version of that original high-performing post that if you were to run ads on it, you've got yourself a high-converting copy or a high-converting video or something like that. So I feel like if you were to take that stance and using AI to help you to tweak and create variations of a top-performing post, repeating it, because I wouldn't say that that's repeating it at that point. You're repurposing it, tweaking it, and creating like almost an A/B test at that point. That could prove to be very valuable. You've got yourself almost unlimited variations that you could test through, use analytics to identify which ones are performing, dissect them to figure out.
That would be limited only to text, right? So there is still this question of how to use AI to create different versions of videos, which at least today is not feasible. It is certainly, I guess, figuring out the message and the content that resonates with your audience, right? And recognizing it quickly enough and trying to perfect it. That is certainly marketing strategy, content strategy that is certainly valid. But is there any suspicion here that part of the reason why people want it, even though perhaps it's being argued for as a strategy, but maybe people or the users who are suggesting the content repurposing, maybe just a matter of trying to save time? Like, listen, I just don't even have the time to repeat. Could it be like I don't want to use the word lazy, not to offend anybody, but, somewhat, I'd like not to put enough effort into this. And for that reason, what's the cheapest, easiest thing to do? Maybe it's just a mental thing. People are just like, hey, it's so much easier to schedule something to post 10 times than to create 10 posts.
Yeah. But I think if we're going into the realm of AI, then I think the time-saving capabilities of taking this one post and creating variations, it might be just as time-saving to just create 10 unique posts with AI, right? Or 10 unique captions. So I hear you there, but I think maybe I'm playing devil's advocate on this specific episode. I feel like to every point there could be an alternative of why then you could create a unique one instead of just taking the same one.
And for us as sort of tool makers, right, that enable that sort of behavior, so that perhaps is yet another side to the story, is that we have to abide by rules in terms of using the systems that these social networks kindly make available to us. And there's a lot of chatter, there's a lot of specs, around requirements around us needing to prevent users from being able to repeat content. Something as aggressive on behalf of X, Twitter, to you can't schedule to more than one profile at once, or you cannot repeat the content that's substantially similar. Other networks aren't as heavy-handed with respect to this restriction, but certainly it is part of the algorithms just based on some shadow banning studies that are being done out there today. So that's something else that we kind of also need to be mindful as we are contemplating, can this even be done? So I've recently did a little bit of a study on what are the tools today on the market that allow content repeats. And I looked at the top 10. And when I say top 10, you just go to G2, social media management suites, and just take the top 10 tools. The top 10 don't do it. So that's an interesting observation. So the bigger tools have more to risk, right? Have more to lose rather, and the risks are higher, and they maybe tend not to implement such a feature. Can we be more creative? Can we find ways to repurpose video content to slice and dice videos into shorter posts and maybe automate that behavior in a way? That is certainly on our mind as well. Although I think anytime you use the word automation to describe the features that a product offers, I mean, you're raising flags with pretty much every social network out there. Automatic posting, automatic responses. I mean, you're inviting trouble.
I could always say that there's a sense of responsibility too, right? As a tool, as developers who are connecting and bridging these social networks to the end users, there's a certain responsibility that we have to ensure not just the terms of service, but I think in general, the whole ethos of social media is genuine connections, right? Whether it's connecting people to people, people to brands, brands to brands, right? Whatever you might say. And so I think there's always that lens too, that these whether they're big, small, what all these social media management tools have to kind of look through, right? Which is beyond the fact like, hey, are we going to get in trouble? Are we going to get shut down? But I think there's also the concept of, are we promoting good environment on social, right? By allowing somebody to come in and post 50 videos of the exact same content every other day. And then, obviously there's a side to it that it's none of our business too, right? And there's definitely that end of the conversation. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I've certainly, sometimes when I, let's say we develop a feature and I see the marketing take over and kind of run with it, and they kind of talk about the feature, and, a post goes out, talks about a feature that we did. And I would find myself sometimes in conversations with them, hey, why don't you do it again and again and again? It seems like that feature, the adoption is slow. It looks like you can talk about it more. And why don't you, kind of continue pushing the message, right, to the users about the feature? And our marketing team always gives me difficult time because they are so adamant, right? That type of repeat, like a blatant repeat, not useful repeat. Perhaps, if we found a new way to describe a feature or a new context in which the feature is useful, they'll maybe go with it. But I can't get them to talk about, say, I don't know, what did we do recently, like a Google Analytics integration. I can't get them to talk about the Google Analytics integration 5 times. Not to mention just repeating. I mean, I can't even get them to talk about it just generally, like different messages, unique content, just because they're just so careful with the audience, and they're so careful with the followers, and they're so mindful of their mental health, even just because, listen, like it's frustrating, right, to sort of be bombarded with the same information. So I hope as we get to the end of the call that you guys are probably guessing that I am not a big fan of repeats of content, while as a kind of like a product person, I can totally see it being implemented rather easily and integrated into Vista Social or any other product for that matter. But I'm just not convinced that would foster anything more substantive other than just maybe like an immediate knee-jerk reaction to something. But like, I don't see this foster what social media is all about, which is the relationships, the influence. But that's just sort of my vote anyways.
Yeah, maybe I fall within the same camp of not being a fan, but I think I'm open to being convinced otherwise. And maybe I can go back to that if somebody can just reach out and say, here is a strategy I've implemented, and look, the data shows that it's working. I'd love to be proved wrong 100%.
I think we can bring them onto this podcast and interview that person with the numbers to prove it. But again, I kind of think that the numbers could be easier to find and easier to maybe even generate, because it does most likely purely at the numeric kind of level. Most likely, if you repeat the content, you're going to see an improvement. But it's the quality, perhaps not the quantity, right? It's this idea, is your followers, can you move different ideas through your followers? Are they actually listening, right? I think perhaps something that we'll continue debating. And part of the reason why we recorded this today is because quite recently, perhaps we kind of felt that we have more than usual number of requests on the subject. And that's kind of, even if you look at our suggestion box, it's probably top 1 or top 2 requests. And we kind of wanted to brainstorm this a little bit live, kind of get everybody maybe contribute even more suggestions. It's certainly an interesting topic.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you guys again for listening. I think this is, like Vitaly said, one of those for sure that we wanted to take online because we're seeing a lot. And if there's some insights that you have and you're like, you want to contribute to this, move over to our suggestions board. We'll have a link probably in the show notes, or just shoot us an email. We'd love to get some more context, maybe even bring you on to one of the future episodes there as well. Feel free to connect with us on social as well. You can find the links to our socials in the show notes as well. All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.